All right, Sistas fans. Now, one topic that people are not happy to discuss within the course of the series is the fact that there are those who feel Zach does not owe Karen anything. And I will say that overall, considering that he and Karen weren't married, yeah, I mean, at best, you just need to cut your losses. I mean, it's almost one of those situations where if the roles were reversed, Zach would be a straight up villain. Because think of it this way. When it comes to the world we live in today, culture and whatnot, politically correct and, not trying to sound sexist or whatever the correct terminology is, Zach sitting up there saying that, you know what, Karen, I paid for everything. I paid for all the dinners, the dates, I let you stay with me, but you never worked, you never did this, you never did that. So over the 3 years we were together, you owe me $77,000. And then if Karen was working to pay him off, you can imagine how toxic Zach's character would have been labeled by people viewing it. Now, on the flip side, we got Karen, who was the one, for lack of a better phrase, taking care of Zach for the most part, or at least putting him up. And during that time, apparently Zach only helped out with the down payment on their apartment together, but then after that just never did anything. And now somebody actually did bring up the fact that, well, Jeremy, think of it this way. Because I think I made a comment on one of my posts about how, it's interesting how Zach apparently rolled up a debt of almost 80 grand with Karen, yet Karen borrowed money from Andy in order to start her salon. I wonder how that happened. And somebody said, well, think of it this way, the $77,000 wasn't something she spent at once. Over time, that debt kind of piled up, and now that we know they've been together 3 years, that actually makes a lot of sense, from his half of the rent, food, dates, clothing, spending money, who knows whatever the hell he did with his airport money when he was working there. So it's just one of those situations where I can definitely see, yeah, 77K could pile up in due time. But in any case, the question is, do you think Zach should actually pay her back? Because somebody made a good point of saying, and people have been going off on the Sistas post I've been making in the group, just talking about this and that, about the check and whatnot. And some people were like, it's one of those situations where Karen wasn't doing it out of her heart, because if she remembers every little thing that she's done for Zach and how much money and this and that, she wasn't doing it out of a kind place. And I guess it's one of those things where sometimes you just need to chalk it up to experience, where, like, if I went on a blind date with a, girl and it didn't go well, or let's say it did go well, we went on a few dates for, let's say, 2 months, and then for whatever reason things don't work out and we break up. What would it look like if I said, you know what, over the past couple months I spent close to like $1,200 on dates, movie tickets and whatnot, so you owe me like 600 of that or something along those lines, because I always paid your way. It just doesn't sound right. And the more, I mean, I'm not saying Zach is wrong for doing what he's doing by paying her back. It's just one of those things where when you really look at the situation they were in, from always breaking up to getting back together and whatnot, it definitely feels weird. And I mean, I never really thought of it until earlier today when I was going to the store. I was just thinking to myself the concept of this video and what to talk about, like whether or not Zach should pay the 77K back. It's just one of those things where it's like, forget the stock tip. Let's say Zach continued working chain breakers or at the airport. Over time, that's a debt he would have paid off in a few years. But here you go with this guy giving you almost $100,000 in less than a week. It just seems really weird. I mean, think of it this way. That's like if Gary expected Andy to pay him, or Aaron or Karen to pay Aaron, or Preston to pay or Danny to pay back Preston for paying all 3 months rent. It just doesn't seem right. But I think really it boils down to the gender roles. Like if you watch Bruh, Pam and Mike were kind of a couple in season 1. Well, honestly, out of the 4, there really aren't any couples because, they're kind of dating around and whatnot. So, yeah, I just look at that show, which is the male version of Bruh. It's like any of those guys asking any of the girls they went out with to pay what they owe because it didn't work out between them, or, hey, I paid for everything when we went out. It just doesn't feel right. So I guess as admirable as Zach, I think it really comes down to the fact that Zach was at his lowest of lows when Karen came across him and pretty much put him up in the same way Fatima did. So I feel like outside of love, it's just the fact that Zach is really appreciative of Karen and the fact that he wouldn't be where he is today without her. I'm not saying Karen is responsible for certain things like the stock win and things like that. I've already done a video explaining how that was all Zach, but I do think it is cool that he's doing it. I just don't see how it's fully realistic, because people talk about how the Gary and Andy situation is ridiculous, like how naive is Andy being written compared to the everyday woman. But when you really think about it out loud, Zach paying back Karen every single cent that quote unquote he owes her seems almost as ridiculous and unrealistic. So I'm not saying Zach is wrong for doing it. I think he shouldn't really have to if he doesn't want to, because like I said before, they weren't married. Not to mention, how about him being falsely arrested when there was technically no real proof? Sure, his name was written down, but at the same time, you know, Sabrina said, give it a couple days, my friend will look at the records to find out who really took the money. And, you know, there are just certain things that don't add up when you look at it from the perspective of, you know what, me and my ex, yeah, I think I should pay him back for this and that. So let's talk about it more in the comment section below. Do you think Karen is entitled to that money? It's like when she heard about his stock went over the phone. It's like, well, as long as he pays back the money he owes me, then I don't care. But have you ever been in a situation like that, male or female, where you're the person who paid the way pretty much, and if you and your partner at the time didn't work out, did you ever rub it in their face what you did for them? You owe me this, you owe me that. Or did you just kind of, like in the Bible, you know, knock the dust off your sandals and keep walking? I mean, let's say Zach decided never to pay her back, you know, do you think it's a situation where Karen is justified in whining about it? Or is it like, well, Karen, you're the one that continued to basically put this guy up, so I mean, it was your money, it was your choice. It's not like he made you do it. And I mean, you know, Danny would kind of constantly remind Zach of, like, you know, you owe Karen and this and that, but it's like, but does he though? So let's have that discussion. Do you think Zach needs to pay Karen back $77,000? Boy, oh boy, this should be a fun one.